Well, we're going to talk about making a buka and hopefully a way to simplify it, especially the parts that many kite makers find to be a little bit tricky. Before we do, I want you to be aware that on this website, when you look at the YouTube, you can see there's a little circle to the right of community. There's just the word community just above the little pictures of the videos. Click on that and that allows you to search the website for videos of a particular interest to you. So if you're planning to make a buka, go to that little circle, click and type in buka, and it will show you many different videos I've already made about different ways to make a buka. I have here a piece of material. This is called Orcon, and I'm using it because it's translucent. I hope you can see it well enough on the video, but I wanted to be able to show you how I now make the buka, the easiest I've ever done. One of the trickiest aspects of making a buka is the leading edge. Now in this, I have the leading edge up here, marked. Then I have a dashed line below it about a ½ inch, and I have a line above the leading edge about a ½ inch. Now this dashed line is if I'm going to put a reinforcing tape here, a stiffening tape, which I often do, I'm going to use this as my guide to do it. And I put the tape on, obviously, before I put the spars on. The other outer one is where I would cut it if I were going to use a hem to roll over on the leading edge spar that would be in here to secure it to the sail. Now, I currently use a glue that is called T8000. For the past 20 some years I've used this glue, which is Weldwood contact cement. It works equally well, but it's a little more complicated to use. This you can use right away. You don't have to apply a coating on each surface to be bonded and then wait for it to dry. You can use it that way, but you don't have to. And it bonds very, very well to these synthetic materials that we use, plastic films, carbon fiber, things like that, mylar. So I would highly recommend you get some of this if you're going to be making kites. It's really amazingly good. I think it's made in China. You can buy it online. I bought this from AliExpress.com from China. I'm not trying to sell you on the idea of buying it, other than the fact that it's the best glue I've found in the 20 some years I've been building kites. So I laid out my material. I drew the pattern I wanted to make on the material with a felt tip pen. This particular one is going to be a buka 15 inches wide, 10 inches tall. As you can see, I also drew where the cross spars go and where the spine goes. These lines help me align the spars correctly. That's the reason I have them. And I would recommend you do the same. In the past, if you look at any of the prior videos about making a buka, what I would normally have done in the past is cut out the sail, allowing for the hem, and then smooth that out on my work surface or glass if I'm going to hot cut it. and began building the kite. Well, whether I'm building a diamond-shaped fighter kite or a rectangular kite or a square kite, like this Buka is rectangular, so like this Buka, I don't do that anymore. What I do is I build the kite on the material, and the last thing I do is cut out around the perimeter of the sail after the kite spars are already installed on the sail. I find this to be easier to work with and a little more efficient, actually. The next thing I do is I cut the spar lengths I need for the kite, whatever kite I'm making. And in this case, in a Buka, you have 4 spars. You have a spine that goes from the nose to the tail. You have the leading edge, which would go right here. And you notice I marked a little spot there where the center is. And then you have the 2 cross spars, and in this kite, they're 18 inches long. So one would go here, and one will go here. But I pre-cut them, so I have them all cut, ready to go before I start. The most challenging part to install in a Buka is the leading edge spar. Now, it's the most complicated, the most troublesome, because it is the key to how the kite will fly, the ultimate key. When a Buka is ready to fly, you curve, you bend the leading edge spar with a tension line, which you put on during the construction. This bend, in order for the kite to fly well, has to be aligned with the natural way that the carbon fiber piece you're using most easily bends. So I hold the leading edge spar in my hand and I rotate with my fingers while it's bent, and I feel it kind of jumping from place to place. Some of those jumps are more severe, more noticeable, and those are the ones where the more natural tendency of this piece of carbon, and everyone's going to be different, is going to want, it is naturally going to bend in that way the easiest and the most consistent. That's how I want to install it. So it's like this, and then laid flat down onto the sail. But before I do that, I have to think about something else. How am I going to attach to the leading edge spar the other spars? How am I going to attach this cross spar up here at the corner? How's that going to happen? Do I just glue it and hope it stays? No, you don't do that, because even though there would be very little space between those 2 spars, the sail material itself isn't strong enough to hold it during flight. And it would be a very vulnerable place that could get damaged. So you don't want that. One of the easiest to do is to place a self-adhesive plastic photo corner, which I don't have one right here, but one of the Buka videos I made shows making a Buka using them. You put it right there at the corner where both these spars would fit into it. What I prefer is to use a piece of, I use heat shrink tubing. It's a small diameter tubing that's larger in diameter than the carbon fiber rods here. These rods are 0.05 inch or 1.3 millimeter. This easily fits in here. It's kind of sloppy, in fact. But what I find is very useful is to put it on so that the leading edge spar and the cross spars become connected. And they become connected at the corner using this little piece of plastic tubing. Now it's not very strong, and it doesn't have to be. It's just to hold the position and the alignment correctly. Now, any small diameter plastic tubing will work, including, this is a piece of a stirring straw from a coffee shop. It's a little larger diameter than this is here, but it works in the same way. And then the question is, how do I connect the spine to the leading edge spar? That's another issue you've got to think about. And all these things you need to think about ahead of time, before you actually start construction. That's one of the biggest benefits of making a buka this way, is the thinking ahead. This is going to help you the most, planning ahead. So I use a piece of heat shrink tubing, or you could use a plastic stirring straw or something similar. This is a needle, darning needle I think it is, and I just bend this piece of tubing here a little bit and poke the needle all the way through right there. And then I take my leading edge spar, put it in, and poke it through that hole. And I bring it right up to my dot right here. And then my spine, the spar for the spine, I just insert into the other end of that tube when I'm ready to install it. And it installs just like this. So it is held here in correct position, just like the crossbars are, by using a little piece of this flexible tubing. Now, if you use a hem to hold the leading edge spar to the sail securely, you would roll that hem over, and that would add strength to this place right here where the spine joins. Now, using these little pieces of plastic tubing is really helpful, especially if, when you make the kite, you make it the way I'm going to do here. And that is, I only use a little bit of glue at each end of the spar except for the leading edge. The leading edge spar is the only one where I glue it along its entire length. I used to glue all the spars along their entire length, and you can do that, and it works fine. But it's a little bit more difficult to do, a little more time consuming, and isn't necessary. All that's necessary is to hold and to bond the spars at their ends, on the cross spars on their ends, and spine, and so on. Once that's done, the center is held in place altogether by the bridle. So it is sort of like an extra glue point right in the center, And if you don't put the lower bridle connection at the center because you don't like the way it spins this way, then just tie those together with a piece of line and put the lower bridle connection 1.5 or 2 inches lower on the spine, and that'll give you a little bit less of a spin. When I make a buka this way, I cut the leading edge spar. Instead of making it 15 inches on this particular kite, which is the width of the kite, I make it 14 7/8. I make it a little bit shorter. I do that to allow for the little end pieces that hold the crossbars to protrude a little bit. They always do, you know, it's not, they don't rest 100% against the end of the spar, so they stick out just a little bit, and this will allow the kite to remain, you know, the rectangle that it's intended to be. So when I glue this, I'm going to glue it with these little pieces on it. I can do this 2 ways. I can put, depending on the diameter of the tubing you're using, you can glue these on, because you can bend them in any way. They don't have to be aligned in any way. You can glue them on each end of the spar, and the same with the one for the spine here. You can glue those on, and once they're set, then you're ready to install. And that's what I prefer to do. So I will do that and be back when the glue is dry. One thing you want to be very careful about when you glue these little pieces on, if this is the way you're going to do it, that the center one, that when you bend the rod, the center one is flat. The pointed part that's going to join with the spine is flat onto the work surface here, so that it's aligned properly. Next thing we're going to do is, in addition to these parts on the leading edge is the place where we attach 2 of our bridle points, and it's also the place where we attach our tension line to create the bend in the leading edge spar. I often put little pieces of this tubing there to use as stops when I tie my line. The other option is simply to glue the line there, tie it and glue it to hold it in place. And you can use super glue to do that, or you can use this T8000 glue. So now I'm ready to install my leading edge spar. The leading edge, when the kite's flying, sometimes the wind will create a pocket there. And by putting tape there first to stiffen it, it helps to minimize that, and it helps the kite fly better. The kind of tape I normally use for that is clear packing tape, 2-inch wide packing tape. I'm going to use this, which is the same sort of tape, but it's something you can see in the video. And what I do is I roll out a piece and put it on my work surface here, very, very lightly. I don't want to ruin the tackiness of the tape. So I just lay it down very gently there, and then I cut it. And I either use a ruler or I do it freehand, but I want to make it about 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch wide. So I just put my ruler here, or maybe I'll just do this freehand, I think I can, is I just lift this tape up off the mat and put it on my sail material. Now if you're going to use a hem, then you would want to use it just a little bit into the hem as well. And if you're not using a hem, it isn't necessary to do it that far. But I'm just going to set it down here, just freehand it, just eyeball it. So it's along my mark here, my dotted line. Now I'm ready to put the glue on and to glue the leading edge spar to the sail. And to do it, I just glue it using the nozzle from the glue, and I just follow my line that I drew, but sometimes it doesn't always come out. And that's the thing about making kites. I mean, they're not rocket science. It's nice to make them perfect as you can, but sometimes things happen. And I've discovered that over the years of making them, even some of those kites where I thought they wouldn't even fly, they fly just fine. So it's not something that's worth worrying too much about. And if the kite doesn't fly, then all you have to do is save the spars and start over again. So now I'm going to lay this on to the glue. Now with this glue, this is all I need to do. Need to wait for it to dry, and then I can install all the rest of the spars. Now often what I will do is put a weight onto the spar itself. Use a piece of wax paper to minimize the glue getting on something, but I'll just put some pieces of tape or rolls of tape here on top of the spar to weight it down to make sure it's bonding correctly with the glue itself. The glue is dry, and now we install the spine. The spine is relatively easy to figure out the orientation because it's such a short piece. It shows itself quite well, quite easily. So what I will do here is simply attach the glue to the spine at the little yellow tubing here. Just insert it in there, twist it around, and then hold it here while I orient it, and then I will put glue on the sail about a ½ inch above the trailing edge line down to the trailing edge line, and that will be where I will bond the spine, those two places. I will also put a little glue under the spine right here on the tape. The next is the crossbars, and we treat them really the same way as we did the spine. We insert them into the tubing, fold the tubing over to the angle to make it follow the line of the pattern, but we have to orient it right. We have to get the orientation of the carbon correct. We'll do that after we put some glue on the end, And I think I'll put glue on the tape right here where the tubing will go as well. And I'll put the glue on the ends here. Insert that into the tubing. Twist it around. Now I'm going to hold the tubing, but inside the crossbar can rotate freely while the glue is wet. So I orient that, set it down, and then I do the same thing here. I put about a 1/2 inch of glue from the corner of the pattern along this crossbar line. And here I just recheck the orientation and then place it right there on the glue. Now it's going to need something to hold it down because it is going, otherwise, because it goes over the spine. And so you need something to hold it down on both ends, so it'll stay contacted with the sail material itself. And then we do the same with the other crossbar. Now these kinds of things here that we're doing are really the trickiest part of making a buka, and I find this is a good solution to it. It makes it quite easy. It requires a little pre-thinking, a little pre-planning, though, in order to have it work right. Orient that, cross over, and let it rest there. Maybe what I'll do is just put a weight here. That should hold it all down pretty well. Or maybe I'll do it here and here. That'll do it right there. Okay. Now what I will do is mark where I'm going to put the taut line hitch and the upper bridles. The upper bridles connection points are on the leading edge spar, but I'm going to mark them now because I'll be melting a hole through the sail material when the time comes. So from the center of the spine, for the bridle connection point, I mark it 1.5 inches on either side of the spine, and that's the location of the upper bridle connection points. Now, it doesn't have to be 1.5 inches. It could be 2 inches. It could be a little less. It will not make much difference. I like 1.5. It just seems to work pretty good for me. The other thing I'm going to do is measure from the end of the sail, or right at the end of the leading edge. Going to measure in 1/2 inch and make a mark right here on both sides. This is where I will tie my taut line hitch, my tension line. It could go closer to the end, but it should be an equal distance from each end when you do make that decision.